Okay, so we're sitting here today with Barb Culberson, and why don't you go ahead and tell us, Barb, exactly what it is you do.
Well, I am a substance abuse counselor with Midwest Institute for Addiction. I'm the inpatient coordinator of our inpatient program.
Okay, and now I understand you also have your own micro practice as well.
I also have my own practice. It's very new and kind of up and coming right now. And I have just a couple of clients that I see on a weekly basis right now.
Okay, now in reference to your own personal experience with alcohol and how it impacts lives, tell us a little bit about your experience and maybe your background education that brought you to where you're at today.
I went back to school after my divorce ended and worked as an occupational therapy assistant for 13 years, and that sort of got me interested in the medical field. And through my working as an OT, I came across a lot of addiction and a lot of mental health issues. So it piqued my interest a little, and I went back to school about 15 years later and earned my master's in psychology, actually in organizational industrial psychology, which is the psychology of business. And I am currently working on getting my PhD in philosophy of psychology.
Okay. Now, the premise of what we've been working on is the fact that we believe that there's a problem growing in America right now where people are completely unaware of their actual amount of alcohol intake, whether they're classified or identify themselves as an addict. And I believe that they are directly kind of have a misconception of how that impacts their life. We recently did a survey focusing on exactly how many drinks do you have and some other questions along that lines to about 70 people. It was a random survey, and the first question, I found the results to be rather interesting. The question was, when you drink alcohol, how many drinks do you have? Now, the way the data reflects, it says about 46%, almost 47% of the people who took the survey said they have 3 drinks or less. And about 31% say they have 6 or less drinks, leaving about 11% or more, or about 7% who say they have 11 or more. Then when you go to the next question, it says, do you or have you ever experienced blackouts as a result of drinking? 55% of those people said yes, leaving 44% saying no. Now,
Charles, I just have a quick question. Of the people who say they have 3 or less, is that at one time, or is that in a week?
Well, the actual question was when you drink, how many drinks do you have?
So that's at one sitting?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And it also doesn't ask, like, is that beer, or is that whiskey, or how
Or the volume,
large
exactly.
is that 1 to 3 drinks? Because I think that would have a big effect on the outcome of the correlation with blackouts.
Agreed. Also, I would think that the amount of regular intake could also affect blackouts due to any kind of damage to the liver or kidneys processing those drinks out. About approximately how long would it take to process out a drink or 3 drinks?
And that's also contingent on whether the person is alcoholic or not. Because an alcoholic processes alcohol half as quickly as a non-alcoholic does, which is why a lot of people drink a lot more, because it takes them longer to reach the effect that they desire by the alcohol.
Now, we started to then go into some of the ramifications that are typically associated with drinking and ask some questions to see if people would, if their average amount of alcohol intake would match the probabilities of the problems that we see from people who have excessive alcohol intake. We asked if anybody had ever had a hangover last more than 24 hours. 33% of the people said yes, leaving about 67% of the people who said no, that they have never had a hangover last more than 24 hours. Would you say that a hangover is a good indication whether or not someone has an alcohol abuse problem, or do you get a lot of people in your field that maybe aren't even aware what a hangover actually is?
Well, I think once you've had a hangover, you know what it is. It's a pretty unpleasant situation. A lot of it's caused because of dehydration and other effects of consuming great quantities of alcohol. The other part is that if you continue to drink, you don't have hangovers. And if you mix other pharmaceuticals like amphetamines with that, you can delete the hangovers altogether. So it's kind of a trick question. You know, maybe the fact that you're having hangovers is a sign that you may be drinking too much on that occasion. But I think you have to look at it in context of their whole behavior. Like, what does the whole week look like?
And the next question we asked is, have you ever developed an illness as a result of drinking? And we went in a little further, if yes, what illness, but that was kind of moot because only 8% of the people said that, or identified any kind of physical illness or physiological impairment as a result of your drinking. Do you feel that that is a parsimonious figure, or do you think that that could be one of the first indications of America's unawareness of alcohol intake and the impacts? What do you see when people first come in? What kind of problems do they have that they're not associating or contributing to their alcohol intake? What do you see?
I see a lot of times people have, well, first I should say, when we have an inpatient come in, we do a complete blood workup for them. We look for Hep C, we look for liver damage, we look for all different kinds of things just to see what sort of health they are in, because we want to treat those problems when they're inpatient as well. But if a person is alcoholic, denial is one of the biggest factors of alcoholism, because it says to you that I don't have a problem, I'm still functioning, I'm still working, and even though you may be doing a very subpar job, you know, you tell yourself that everything is okay, because admitting that you have a problem means that you may have to take some action. So a lot of times when people have different health issues, they may attribute it to something completely different. You know, I didn't get enough sleep last night, that's why I have chronic headaches, or I'm going to the bathroom a lot because I drink too much coffee, or other things that can happen, you know, pancreatitis. I may have a pain because I stretched too much in yoga the other day. So a lot of times the symptoms are there, and they're very clear to a professional, but to the layperson, they may not associate that with their alcoholism or their intake.
Another interesting figure.
And I almost forgot, I should add also that when we talk about illness, we're not only talking about physical illness, but we're talking about mental illness as well. Because bipolar, schizophrenia, a lot of mental illnesses, people will self-medicate with alcohol without really realizing it. And until someone gets sober, a lot of times it's several years into their recovery where they get diagnosed with the initial problem which they started drinking over.
Now, what about on the flip side? Could you see somebody who maybe perhaps neurologically is a normal, healthy adult, and then the onset of their drinking actually causes and displays behaviors in their life very similar to that of someone who is bipolar or maybe borderline personality, and when the alcohol is gone, they slowly revert back to that healthy neurological state?
Yes, actually I see a lot of people misdiagnosed with bipolar, and particularly with antisocial personality, because the personality of an addict really is very antisocial. You know, you isolate, you don't really care about people, and a lot of times you get misdiagnosed. When people are not being honest about their alcohol intake, it's difficult for a professional to accurately diagnose them. They do say that most people return full brain function once they stop abusing their chemical, but sometimes you don't get a full 100% recovery.
The next question we had was, have you ever missed work as a result of drinking? Now, mind you, that our people who took our survey, about 70% said that, you know, they have 6 or less, and a large majority of that said 3 or less. The next question was, have you ever missed work as a result of your drinking? And 37% of our surveys said that they had missed work as a result of drinking. Leaving 62% say that they don't ever miss work as a result of their drinking. Now, when you take into consideration, I understand that some people 3 drinks might be enough to throw them under the bus, but then An alcoholic might be able to put down a liter a day and still get up and go to work the next day.
It's very true.
Why do you think that is?
I think really there's a motivation to continue working because that's your source to be able to get your drink. And if you don't go to work, then you don't have money to buy your booze. And if you can't have your booze, you're going to be in trouble. So there's kind of a motivation for an alcoholic. And then there's also the factor of tolerance that comes in. You know, a person who drinks continually over years can build up a tolerance to alcohol where it takes them a little longer to get that effect. So you can have somebody drinking a liter a day and they hardly even look drunk to you. They look very functional.
Now, we've asked people if they've ever been arrested or had law problems as a result of their drinking. We also had them go in a little further as to what their experiences were. But 73% of all the people who took the survey said they've never had any kind of legal problem as a result of their drinking. Now, I see you smirking.
Yes.
So expand on that. Tell me what you think of that figure.
I can tell you for one thing that alcoholics as a group are very intelligent as a rule. And we have seen incredible coping skills among alcoholics. A lot of times an alcoholic, because of that, isolating behavior and, they're not really doing anything but drinking. They're not really involved in their lives. They're not really out there. People will find ways to get their booze without having to drive. People will find ways to go to bars, they'll get a ride from somebody, or they'll go to a bar that's across the street and they don't have to drive.
So people will actually modify their lives to avoid the blatant implications of perhaps a drinking problem.
Sure. A lot of people, if they get like a DWI, for instance, will think, well, maybe if I just stop driving, I won't have to worry about that. It doesn't occur to them that maybe they should stop drinking.
Now, they also said in our survey about 78% of all people surveyed claim they've never neglected their household finances as a result of drinking. Now, I thought that was quite interesting, especially considering the amount of people that had admitted to missing work as a result of their drinking, as well as being hungover, not hungover. What do you think? When you see people come in, what kind of financial shape are they usually in? And when did they say that they arrived there? Did they just wake up one day and lose everything? Or do you see when people come in to your services perpetual behavior, perhaps even before the drinking is out of control?
I can tell you on the whole, because our facility is a private pay organization, most of our clients have very wealthy parents, and they're very enabling. And they enable the behavior of their children well into the child's 30, 40 years old. And other times there's a spouse that may be enabling the behavior and helping them financially. So I think it's really easy for people to rationalize, cost and effect of their drinking or using. You can buy like inferior toilet paper for a month, and you'd have a little extra money to buy your whiskey. Even a housewife can manipulate the funds of the family.
So we're back again to modifying the lifestyle to acquire our need.
Very much so.
And also the fact that, especially as you indicated, a lot of the people that you work with in a private pay practice have access to the money. So do you ever see people saying, oh, I don't have a problem because I've never lost my car, I've never been arrested, I make my house payment, I have a good job, but yet their kidneys are failing?
Unfortunately, I see that a lot because people judge their success by what they have, by the external world that they live in, much more so than their internal world. And I know that a lot of people will say that are in recovery that it's the peace of mind that they've gained by their sobriety that's much more valuable to them than any car or house or relationship that they have.
The next two questions kind of go together, and this is really where I see some discrepancies in the data that are unclear to me that perhaps as a professional in this field you could shed some light on. question was, have you ever lost a loved one due to your or others drinking? Kind of parlays into the next question of, how many people do you know that have died as a result of drinking? Well, 74% of all the people claim that they've never lost anyone as a result of their drinking. But when I go down and I start scrolling through the results of how many people do you know that have died as a result of drinking, the data's kind of all over the place. Some of the figures are coming back, people saying 0, but then there are responses here with people saying 20 plus, 4, 50, 22, 5, 30 plus, 10, 4, 3, and the data goes on and on like that, with about every other figure being a 0. Now, I am having a hard time wrapping my mind around to where I understand one individual who may have took that survey may not have had anyone in their immediate life die or go away as a result of their drinking. But considering the infamous law of 8 degrees of separation, I would think with these kind of figures, there would be less than 2 degrees of separation. Do you feel that people don't associate the failing health with the drinking? Or do you think that, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I guess my first thought would be it would really depend on the age of the person taking the survey. You know, my personal experience with having persons who have died as a result of alcoholism it's pretty high because I'm surrounded by it. You know, I'm much more in the trenches of the people who have the problem. So I think statistically in the United States, it's 1 in 3 persons has a problem with alcohol or has a problem with alcohol within their family. So those statistics do kind of surprise me. But again, if somebody has taken that survey who's like in their early 20s, you know, maybe they're just not surrounded by enough people who have reached that chronic stage of alcoholism where it is affecting their health.
Do you think a certain level of guilt and shame comes into play to where, like say for instance, there's a 19, 20-year-old kid who's off to college and off to the races, as they would say, and having a good old time, but you know, Uncle Joe just passed away, and the family isn't extremely forthright as to why, and as well as the whole concept of keeping up with the Joneses, pride. Do you feel that that occurs often?
I think a lot of deaths are really understated when it comes to alcoholism because people don't want to talk about it. It's still kind of an off topic for a lot of families, especially if there is active alcoholism going on within the family. Because if you identify that it's within your heredity, then you're almost identifying yourself as an alcoholic.
So we understand and we know as a society in this country that alcohol is here and it has a strong grasp in this country. We know the figures are there that people definitely like to drink. Now, what do you think could be done in the future, in the most ideal circumstance, to help increase awareness, self-awareness within an individual about their own personal alcohol intake, as well as maybe perhaps shed light on the overconsumption that we are experiencing in this country, but seemingly neglecting? I mean, you see TV advertisements all the time about the obesity issues and overeating issues in the United States, but you don't ever hear anything talking about how we as a society encourage alcohol intake and totally forego the responsibility and consequences of our actions.
I think we do glamorize the drinking world. You know, when I see commercials, everybody's very elegant. You know, nobody's throwing up on the couch or in your, you know, cat's litter box, and you know, there aren't mangled bodies in a car accident from somebody who's crossed the center line. You know, everybody's successful and having a great time. They're playing volleyball, and you know, it looks very wonderful. And I think something I heard just the other day really kind of impacted me when I heard that our government wants to make trans fats illegal. And I can't help but wonder, like, how much more dangerous is the alcoholism problem in our country than trans fats are. And I think that those kind of lack of perspective and priorities are going to have to change before we can affect a change in the alcoholism problem in our country.
What do you feel, or what do you speculate as a probability for influencing that sort of government facilitation? Why are we going after trans fat and not the alcohol?
Well, the alcohol lobby is a very strong lobby and very influential in Congress and in our government. And it's a multi-billion-dollar business every year. And I guess trans fat is not. As we become a more health-conscious nation, I can only hope that we kind of take a look at the mental capacity that we have and the mental health that we have in our country, as well as the physical health too. And I think the best thing we can do as individuals is just set a good example, by not looking outside of ourselves for happiness, like a lot of people do with alcohol, but finding that happiness within and finding some peace within by non-material things, by more spiritual means in our life.
Well, I want to thank you for your time, Barb, and you've helped me understand this data just a little bit better.
Thanks for having me.
I appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Thank you.